All right, so this is going to be episode 12, I believe, of deck profiles for the Brilliant Stars to Prismatic Evolutions format. Video is going to be about um, Dusknoir, and yeah, so I'm gonna cover Dusknoir and its role in the format. It's sort of yeah, a lot, sort of um, answer a lot of questions regarding uh, Dusknoir and sort of what it's supposed to do, and yeah, why it's been shrouded in so much controversy as well. All right, so yeah, this is gonna be kind of a quicker video, guys. The archetype I'm covering Dark Dusknoir with, I've already covered for this format, so I don't want to sort of overlap with that content. I just want to explain Dusknoir and sort of demystify it a little bit so that people understand, um, yeah, kind of understand Dusknoir a little more. Right. So Dusknoir is from Shadow Fable, 160 HP, Psychic type Pokemon. Has the ability Curse Blast. Once during your turn, you may put 3 damage counters on one of your Pokemon. If you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. Alright, so stage 2, Psychic 160 Pokemon. Has the attack Shadow Bind for 2 Psychic and colorless, 150 damage. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. Right? 3 retreat cost and dark dark weakness. Right? So yeah, just on paper, card is very overpowered, right? It's a single prize Pokemon for starters, right? So um being able to put 13 damage counters wherever you want as a single prize Pokemon, right? And you trade is a very powerful effect, right? Um and so this card has been the subject of a lot of controversy since it's come out, right? So when it first came out, Shroud of Fable, right? So that was after Twilight Masquerade. Um, that was sort of a period in which people were starting to realize how um sort of undiscovered the format is, and as a result, we're kind of taking advantage of that with pretty greedy lists. And yeah, Dusknoir got thrown into the ring, and yeah, it chaos ensued, right? um, yeah, and so you know, Dusknoir didn't really deserve that, to be honest. The card isn't as overpowered as people make it out to be, right? It's just sort of a result of just people's ignorance ultimately. Um, and so kind of want to shed some light on this card for a bit. All right. Um, so Dusknoir, um, got printed in Shrouded Fable, right? And if you take a look at the Shrouded Fable set list, at least for the Pokemon, you see that leaves a lot to be desired, quite frankly, right? It's not really anything too devastating in this, except for like, like Kyurem, um, and Ursa Baby, Blood and Ursa Luna. So this set was definitely designed to really introduce very devastating single surprise Pokemon, right? There's not like a stage 2, EX Pokemon with like 350 HP in this set, right? It's just low HP single prize Pokemon with pretty good, abilities and attacks, right? But so and that's the reason I say the set leaves a lot to be desired is because those Pokemon generally just have not been dominating the Scarlet and Violet era, right? Even though there's some pretty good ones, you know. So yeah, uh, so the set, you know, didn't really introduce anything crazy besides Dusknoir and like Hiram. But it did introduce Dusknoir, right? And a card with such a strong ability is definitely an eye popper, right? Um, so Dusknoir is a pretty hard to understand card, even for me, right? Because if you take it to the games, which I like to do, right, the core games, um, Dusknoir is a pretty hard to define Pokemon, right? Has very low base. It's pre-evolution. Dusclops has very high defense stats, right? So it's like a wall Pokemon basically. Um, but Dusknoir when it evolves, right, gains a lot of offensive power, right? Um, Dusknoir like has like 100 base attack, right? And then maintains some of its high defensive power, right? But it has a very low HP value, right? So despite having like very high stats, right, high defensive stats and a high attack stat, right, its HP isn't that great. So it's pretty easy to pick apart with something like a wall breaker, basically, right? Um, but despite that, it also has a very good move pool, right? Has access to like the what are called like the elemental punches, fire punch, thunder punch, ice punch. You know, gets a lot of very high base power ghost moves, and it's a ghost type, right? So it can take advantage of that, right? And also it's a ghost Pokemon, right? And ghost Pokemon are traditionally pretty good Pokemon in terms of their stat line, right? I mean, in terms of their move pools, right? Move pool is just a term in the core games to refer to the variety of moves that a Pokemon can learn, right? And so, yeah, um, Dusknoir is a pretty hard card to Pokemon to define in the game just because of that, basically, right? Um, but you know, if you watched my VGC video, term and remember the categories of Pokemon that I put Pokemon into, I would say Dusknoir would probably fall under the category of like meta Pokemon. Um, preci- pri- um, Precisely because of the explanation I kind of just gave regarding its high move pool, high stats, and its tremendous typing, which is Ghost, right? So yeah, despite not having the greatest HP values and stuff like that, I would say Dusknoir classifies as a meta Pokemon, basically, right? Um, so yeah, um, its pre-evolution Dusclops, I would definitely put in the category of like utility, right? But Dusknoir definitely is a meta Pokemon, right? And so in the game, it's no different, right? And if you've been playing Pokemon a lot, right, you're pretty familiar with, you know, Dusknoir's kind of history in the archive in the game, right? Dusknoir usually is equipped with pretty powerful ability because it's a stage 2 Pokemon and also because it's a psychic Pokemon. So psychic Pokemon are generally pretty good at you know, kind of controlling board states ultimately. Right. So like You have this one that's still expanded, was still a standard, that lets you move special energies around. This one, which turns off special energy, so it's basically Temple of Sinnoh. This one from Cosmic Eclipse lets you put damage counters anywhere you want. And this one that lets you put Pokemon on your bench, right? Onto your opponent's bench, right? So, and then of course you have like Trevenant Dusknoir, which is a pretty notorious tag team Pokemon. Um, so yeah, um, so yeah, Dusknoir historically is a pretty devastating Pokemon in thing in the trading card game. So this card is no different, right? And especially if you've been watching my deck profile videos, you see me explain, particularly in the Coffer Grigus video I just made recently, um, that kind of what Pokemon's trying to go for in the Scarlet and Violet era is sort of having your board and your deck built around powerful Pokemon rather than having just like maybe one or two powerful Pokemon in your deck and then having like very powerful trainer cards like they did in something like Sun and Moon, for example, with tag team cards like tag team trainers, right? So yeah, uh, so under that category of you know meta, that means that Dust Noir can fall into a little categories in terms of play style ultimately, right? But I would say that in terms of the trading card game, um, sort of to juxtapose away from the core game, you know, Dusknoir would definitely fall under the category of combo, um, yeah, combo cards, right? Um, you know, um, the trading card game is much more structured than the core game, and so this card would like mathematically fall into more combo decks than it would into like a wall breaker deck, aka like a like a checkmate deck or like a control deck, right? So yeah, um, that's more I would say is like a combo card basically, right? And so sort of like I explained in the ancient video, Dusknoir is a combo piece, you know, that basically allows you to string together like combos that would help you basically sweep your opponent, right? So that's ultimately why I categorize it as a combo card is because um if you watched my VGC video, you know that I combo cards in like trading card games would be like the equivalent of like sweeper Pokemon in the core game, where their win condition is to set up and then just sweep your opponent basically, right? So yeah, that's ultimately what Dusknoir is designed to do, right? And the reason why this card is been shrouded in such controversy is because basically you know people ultimately just have not been tested in the format, and so as a result, they don't really understand anything regarding you know um sort of what Pokemon did, so that with the release of Dusknoir, there wouldn't be a 75% meta share, where 75% of day two decks have Dusknoir in them, right? So if we look over Dusknoir again, right? The last part of his ability is that it says if you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out, right? And so what does that mean? That means your opponent takes a prize, right? And so not only that, you're putting damage counters down, right? So and you're putting a lot down, 13, right? So you take a card like Charizard, right, and you put 13 damage counters on it, leaves it with 200 HP. and 200 is a pretty easy number to hit in this format, right? Like it's not a number that's kind of out of the range of a lot of meta cards. So chances are you're probably going to take a prize after using Curse Blast, right? And so to sort of balance that out, what Pokemon did was that in Shrouded Fable, they also printed another card, which has been pretty popular in tandem with Dusknoir, which is this card that you probably know very well, Pheasantipede EX, right? So Pheasantipede EX is the ability to flip the script. Once during your turn, if any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you may draw 3 cards. You can't use one flip the script ability each turn, right? So flip the script, right, is a pretty powerful ability, right? Just draw 3 cards if you get knocked out, right? And especially in a format, you know, where it's pretty hard to find pretty reliable draw support, right? Card like Mew, for example, which you can only draw if you have less than 3 cards in your hand. This card is just incredibly powerful, right? Um, and this card was ultimately printed so that Dusknoir wouldn't be able to, um, have 75% meta share, right? Because also in this format, besides Dusknoir, is a card that you also are pretty familiar with, which is Iono, right? Each player shuffles their hand, puts it in the bottom of their deck. If either player puts any cards at the bottom of their deck this way, each player draws a card for each of their remaining prize cards, right? So, Dusknoir plus Iono equals devastation, basically, right? If a card like Pheasant Deputy, isn't around, right? Because basically what it can happen is your opponent can basically map out a scenario in which you use, Dusknoir's and its pre-evolution Dusclops, which has the same ability, except it only puts 5 damage counters. Lower your hand size down, lower your prize counts down, right? Without you, taking prizes. Then just Iono your hand down and knock out your whole board, right? And then you have to set up with maybe 4 cards in your hand, right? Plus your top deck, right? So, and then in a format where again, there's not a lot of draw support, reliable draw support. I mean, that's pretty much the game set match, right? So that's basically what Pheasant Dippy was printed for, right? And so obviously we haven't seen that sort of manifest in terms of a exchange, but like an exchange in a game state scenario. Um, but that's basically what Pokemon was going for, right? So all this talk, about Dusknoir should be banned, whatever, whatever, right? Is just unfounded, you know, unfounded opinions, basically, right? So basically, um, yeah, that's Dusknoir, right? And um, you know, the card again hasn't really been that um popular in terms of seeing it in a lot of archetypes. All it really did was just become a piece in Charizard, and then under Shrouded Fable formats, we're seeing like it paired with like Pokestop and Palkia vstar, right? That's pretty much all we've seen in terms of meta Dusknoir decks, right? And so yeah, um, the other deck, on the other hand, though, that we have seen Dusknoir party paired with is Terapagos, right? Um, so Terapagos, when it came out, right, people were pretty excited because it was the first other Pokemon to come out. Obviously, Lapras EX also came out with it too, right? But that card, it's much harder to play than Terapagos, right? And so yeah, it was a lot of excitement came along with it because of all the cards that got printed to support it. You know, Noctowl, Rotom, Buffalint, and of course Area Zero. And so yeah, this card got a lot of play when it came out. Um, a lot of players picked up on it, and sort of came up with their what I would call cheese um variants to Terrapagos, right? Pretty unfortunate that cheese is pretty much what came out of Terrapagos, and it's pretty much only been the way people have been playing Terrapagos since it's come out, right? Um, and so yeah, people were playing it with Dusknoir, right? And how they built it was that they would build a very heavy search line, right, of a lot of search cards like Buddy Buddy Poffin and stuff like that, and then they would build it with Pidgeot EX, right, and then they would basically set up a board where they were using Pidgeot EX to find their combo pieces to attack with Terrapagos, and then use Dusknoir to manipulate prizes so that you can get to Briar win condition, for example, right? Or you can, take like multiple prizes on one turn, right? Because a big issue with Terrapagos is that Terrapagos is just has a really bad price, right? Really has a really bad price trade, right? So yeah, that's kind of been another way people have been playing Terrapagos, and I would say it's probably like the second most popular variant of Dusknoir, right? Besides Charizard. Um, so that's a that's the list and the archetype I'm going to cover for this video. Um, and so yeah, the reason why I want to cover um, Terrapagos Dusknoir is because I revisited Terrapagos and I was pretty um, pleased with sort of some lists that I was coming up for Terrapagos, right? And I got a lot of insight about sort of what Pokemon was trying to go for with Terrapagos, which was that basically Terrapagos is a combo deck, right? That has a bunch of combo pieces that are all working together to try to get you to Terrapagos, right? So if you read Terrapagos, right, it's on paper it's not a very impressive card, but you realize that once it's set up, it can do a lot of very incredible things, right? So it does 30 damage for each of your bench Pokemon for its first attack, and its second attack prevents all damage done to it by basic non-colorless Pokemon, right? So set up, right? This card can do very devastating things to people's boards, right? It can do up to 240 damage as a basic Pokemon, right? And with no like drawbacks, and it can turn off basic non-colorless Pokemon, right? If you get to it, right? So that's kind of what Pokemon was trying to go for, right? Is that this Pokemon does a lot of things, it's just it needs a lot of support, right? So it's ultimately a combo deck, ultimately, right? And so paired together with a card like Dusknoir, you get a very interesting scenario where this card that has a lot of options now also has the option of taking multiple prizes on a single turn, right? So yeah, I feel like this is probably the best variant to Dusknoir right now. Um, so if you wanted to test with Dusknoir, I would probably test it with Terrapagos. So yeah, I'm gonna give my take on Terrapagos Dusknoir and show you my list. Um, so yeah, so nothing really special. That I changed in terms of the core of Terrapagos. So yeah, I played two Terrapagos EX, 4/4 Noctowl line, right? Two Rotom Fan Rotoms, and then Buffalint from Stellar Crown, and then Buffalint from Surgeon Sparks, right? Um, yeah, and then for draw support, I play Mew EX and I play Radiant Greninja. Right? Radiant Greninja is mainly a combo piece for Blast Trumpet, right? And then finally play 1-1 Pidgeot EX line. Right? Feel like you don't really need to play more because ultimately um you can search everything in your deck anyways. So there's not a piece that you need to look for um that you necessarily need to play a more thick line of Pidgeot EX, like a 2-2 line or a 2-1-2 line, for example. Right? So it's just there so that you have better odds, basically. So yeah, and then the Dusknoir line I play is 2-1-2, right? So two Duskulls, one Dusclops, and then two Dusknoirs, right? And the reason is so that it's easier to set up like a double Dusknoir turn, for example, and so that you have more outs to Dusknoir in your deck, so you don't have to be using a lot of pieces such as like Night Stretcher to be getting Dusclopses or Dusknoirs back throughout the game, right? So yeah, that's the Pokemon line, and yeah, right, for trainers, play for Iono, right? So Iono's pretty strong in this deck because you play Dusknoir, so you just want to maximize your outs to it. So and it's your main draw supporter, so you want to have a lot of copies of it. And I play three Drayden from Surgeon Sparks. Card reads: look at the top seven cards of your deck. You may reveal a Pokemon or a trainer card you find there, put them into your hand. Shuffle the other cards back into your deck. So I feel like this card is pretty strong in this deck because this deck is mainly combo and has a lot of combo pieces that you can string together with a Drayden. And so, as opposed to a card like Arvin, which only searches out tool cards and item cards, this card can search out any trainer card that from the top seven cards of your deck. So, if you're looking for like an Area Zero or like a rare candy, then Drayden can facilitate that better than something like an Arvin, right? So I play three copies. Um, Probably only going to need to play one or two, but you want to just hit them early. So yeah, play three copies, right? Then play one copy of Crispin and one copy of Briar. So I dropped the Crispin line a lot in this deck because basically realized that Crispin is probably not that significant to get off um because for example you have Pidgeot, so if you need to search energy you can just use Pidgeot, and also with Radiant Greninja and Glass Trumpet you have a lot of options to get um energies onto your Terapagoses, right? And plus since you're playing Dusknoir, um you can play it in a more core game style where you're not trying to just devastate your opponent, but you're really trying to map out a win throughout the game, right? I feel like it's kind of the appeal for Terrapagos for me that since you can play a lot of different styles, you don't have to, just play cheese, right? So it's pretty unfortunate that, people have sort of gravitated towards more cheese styles for Terrapagos, but, whatever gives you $10,000, right? So yeah, then I play one copy of Briar, right? Generally, you only want to play one copy unless you're playing more balanced styles of Terrapagos where you don't want to have to search too much. Um, and then yeah, play two Glass Trumpets. This is gonna be your main energy acceleration for the deck, so you want to play a good copy amount of copies. You don't want to play too many copies that it clogs up your board because once you get Terrapagos set up, you're pretty much good to go, right? And then yeah, uh, two bosses orders, right? So, this is a Dusknoir desk. So, you're gonna probably be falling behind prizes a lot. So, you could, cut a piece, like maybe for example, cut a Drayden and add a counter catcher. In fact, I probably might just do that in real time. Um, because I feel like counter catchers probably having one counter catcher is probably better than having three Draydens. Um, but yeah, um, you do want to just limit your gust because of how Terrapul's Dustmal works. You can pretty much hit any number. So in a deck that's kind of like a sweeper style deck, um, it's not going to really matter whether you have a counter catcher or not because ultimately you can just save your supporter for next turn because you're probably going to have such a good lead that you're not going to need to combo with a counter catcher, right? But counter catcher is a pretty good card to have, so one copy's fine, right? And so the ace spec I play in this deck probably going to be a surprise, and it's Master Ball. Um, but search your deck for a Pokemon, reveal it, and put it in your hand. Then stuff for your deck. So this card um, doesn't really get a lot of popularity. When it got printed, only deck that really people were considering playing it in was Lugia. But I mean, you could play anything you want in Lugia, so it doesn't really matter that people were considering to play Master Ball in Lugia. Um, but I feel like in this deck, um, momentum is everything, and so a card like Master Ball, where your deck revolves around a lot of evolution Pokemon and Pokemon that you have to play from your hand. I feel like Master Ball is pretty invaluable in this deck, right? Generally, people have been playing Tropical Dusknoir with Prime Catcher, and I feel like Prime Catcher is pretty good in this deck because it can serve as a switch option, right? But if you're not even, using a card like Last Trumpet, for example, I mean, switch options are pretty, meaningless in Terrapagos. So yeah, um, if you want to play our Prime Catcher, be my guest. But I feel like Master Ball's better because it combos better with Noctowl, right? I don't want to get too much into combos that you can do in this deck, but um, you can explore that for yourself. But yeah, I play Master Ball, right? Then I play two copy of Night Stretcher. I feel like Night Stretcher was also another card printed in Shrouded Fable to support single prize decks, basically, right? This card is like a spiritual successor of a card that was printed in Sun and Moon, Guardians Rising, I believe, called Rescue Stretcher, right? Um, which was a way more powerful version of Night Stretcher because it could shuffle three Pokemon into your deck. But basically, yeah, this card, Rescue Stretcher, was generally people were playing one copy basically in every single deck. But this card really thrives in decks that centered around like single prize Pokemon. And since you're probably going to be playing a six prize game, right? Like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, um, you're going to be using this card a lot, so you can play multiple copies of it, right? So yeah, Night Stretcher is sort of that's kind of what people are going. That was kind of what Pokemon was trying to go for with Night Stretcher. So yeah, two copies in this deck is pretty effective, right? Um, Over something like a Super Rod where you have to then search the card to back out, right? That you shuffled into your deck. Other retrieval card plays Palpad, one copy. So this deck has a lot of invaluable trainer cards. I mean, supporter cards like Crispin, Briar, Boss's Orders. So being able to use them multiple times in a game is pretty invaluable, and you can use them as fodder for like Ultra Balls and stuff like that. And then you can shuffle them back in your deck for later. Right? Then our search cards, we play four Nest Balls, four Ultra Balls. Then play three Area Zero Underdepths. Right? It's the Stadium card for Terrapagos. Um, yeah. You don't want this card to be clogging up your deck because generally it's not really any decks that have like a main supporter, a main stadium for their deck besides Terrapagos and like Terra Pokemon decks in general. So you don't need to play like 4 copies for it. And you have like Pidgeot EX to search it, Drayden to search it, Noctowl to search it. So many outs. So there's no reason to be playing more than 3 copies, right? But you don't want to be playing 2 because, again, if you have to use one to as fodder, or if one gets prized, then you want to have multiple copies, right? Then you play 3 rare candies. So yeah. Again, Terapco is a pretty fast-paced deck. Sweeps pretty quickly. Um, and so, rare candy's pretty like crucial in this deck, but it's not crucial to the point where you're going to play 4 copies, especially considering the fact that you already play a lot of other combo pieces and retrieval cards such as Night Stretcher, Pal Pad, Flash Trumpet, right? Don't want to be clogging your deck up with another combo piece. So 3 is fine. You're going to use 1 for Pidgeot, potentially. And then, maybe if you have 2 left, you can string together like a double Dusknoir with 3, right? But that's not something that you're going to be going for too often. So, there's no point of you playing 4, right? If you want to, you can maybe cut like an Iono or something and add like another candy if you're feeling insecure or something. But yeah, I feel like 3 is a good call. Then you play 2 grass, 2 lightning, 2 water. So this is a big, drift away from my standard Terrapagos decks that generally play 3 of each. But I basically concluded that, with cutting a Crispin and also with, not a lot of popularity of basic decks besides like Miraidon, it's not really important to have multiple copies of your energies. And so um, I feel like you can cut down on a copy of each and you can fit more combo pieces, right? Plus the Greeting Greninja combo isn't that important that you need, to have a lot of energies in your deck. And so yeah, cut down to 6 and now you have more space for more combo pieces. And it's closer to that cheese, Terrapagos, but now you have that actual Terrapagos theme where it is an Omni Pokemon and it can do a lot of things, right? So yeah, that's my Dusknoir list. Yeah, probably gonna be testing this a lot. Really like Terrapagos, really like Dusknoir, honestly, personally, and so yeah, gonna get a lot of games in with this. Probably put the Champow down, which is pretty surprising for me. Um, and yeah, give this a lot of testing and sort of get as good with this as I am with Champow, basically. Right, so that's gonna be a lot of fun. And yeah, if you want to, tinker with this list, move some pieces around, you know, this deck is very good for tabletop. This deck is very good for online. Um, and so don't be afraid to give it a test anywhere. And yeah, um, that's Dusknoir. Um, so yeah, I hope you like this video. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you in the next video.